he had the history of the Velikovsky thing down pat, and so obviously he's been at it longer than any of us. So he had some very unique and I thought totally valid insights there yesterday on the history of the Velikovsky phenomenon and how it kind of got off to the wrong foot by these announcements by Larrabee and others in these early magazines, you know, talking about Joshua's son standing still and all this other, what I would consider to be peripheral material that's not important to the debate at all. Unfortunately, that's always become kind of front and center in the discussion of these ideas rather than the nuts and the bolts of the evidence from ancient language and from the ancient text, which paint a totally compelling picture. So that's probably where I would leave it. Once Kronos folded up shop, Dave started up Aeon in 1988, and so I was kind of his right-hand man. And so originally it was a two-man operation. So at some point, Dave took a time out to take a real job and try and earn a living. Because believe it or not, I know this is going to be shocking, but people don't pay us a ton of money to talk about Venus traditions and the pyramid text. So. At some point, both of us have had to work real jobs, you know, which is just like pure torture. It's like the prisoner in the jail cell just sweeping for the sake of sweeping or clearing the logs out for the sake of clearing logs out, because all you want is to get back to the pyramid text and start unraveling the mysteries. You don't want to be bothered wasting time trying to earn a couple pennies, but sometimes you got to do it. You bet. I mean, my philosophy from day one is just accepting the reality they're never going to be accepted, and hoping that's wrong. But you know, to me, I'm not expecting mainstream science to announce us as, you know, the next Nobel Prize winner at any point in the near future. So my philosophy is I'm writing for posterity, and just trying to solve this mystery. And but you know, we are finding more and more scholars citing our works and showing interest. Let's put it that way. And so that's encouraging. And you know, the reality is, there's no doubt with each space probe that goes up in the sky, you know, they look at Mars and they see that Mars has been has had a tortured history and has been scarred, and it's lost its atmosphere, it's probably lost its water, et cetera, probably lost any primitive life forms it had. You know, those things just didn't happen by accident. If the catastrophes we describe are a reality, you know, it's pretty easy to understand why Mars would look the way it does. Ditto with Venus. And so I have absolutely no doubt that our research will be accepted as credible and valid at some point. It's just whether that will happen in our lifetime or not. That remains questionable. You know, again, I'm not an astronomer, so I'm probably not the person to talk about that. Maybe Wall would be, but you know, the certainly conventional science believes Venus was formed just like every other planet, you know, countless billions of years ago. I mean, that number changes. I mean, it's changed 3 or 4 times during my lifetime, but let's just say, as Carl Sagan used to say, billions and billions of years ago, and that it's stayed on that same orbit ever since. And so we know from our own research that that's a load of garbage. And so Venus has certainly been on a drastically different orbit within the last 6,000 years. No doubt about it. You can take that to the bank. And so that right there is, you know, a fundamental challenge to mainstream cosmology. And how that impacted the planet Venus, you know, that's for others to to determine, but certainly that catastrophic history could not help but be reflected in Venus's chemistry, Venus's atmosphere, Venus's structure. Yeah, I think the ramifications are huge. I mean, let's face it, we all want to know the history of the planet. And you just go right down the history of scientific revolution. You don't really know what those ramifications of those ideas will be. And then when you find out that these catastrophic events are behind the origins of religions, that is a provocative idea as well. And so then you have to try and say, well, you know, what is the Old Testament describing, for example, when they talk about an angry God tossing down a thunderbolt and blowing away, you know, a bunch of people? What is the Old Testament talking about when they talk about the Queen of Heaven and offering human sacrifices to that? And so those are, you know, nobody wants to talk about human sacrifices to their God, and yet every ancient culture practiced that. The period involved with the planets that we have reconstructed was also behind the origin of civilization. So the earliest civilizations were totally preoccupied with the idea of trying to recreate this situation in the sky. And so their earliest monumental architecture, like the pyramids in Egypt and Mesoamerica, they are specifically designed to emulate a structure that was seen in the sky. That structure is no longer there, obviously, but it's totally clear from the ancient texts that they were describing the cosmic mountain. And that cosmic mountain has a specific history, and it has a specific spatial relationship to the rest of the planets. And so my point is that virtually every aspect of culture, whether it's the origins of drama, the origins of literature, the origins of religion, the origins of dance, music, they all go back to these catastrophic events involving the planets. And as I say that, I realize how incredibly ludicrous that sounds in the absence of a full documentation, you know. But so that's the story.
But you've got the documentation.
We've got it. We've got it sorted out A to Z. It's all solved. No, we have, you know, obviously we've been at this for 40 or 50 years, and we've made tremendous inroads, but obviously a lot of research needs to be done. And Dave and I are always reaching out to young scholars and young scientists around the world, trying to get them to chip in and help. You know, it would be great to have some experts in the ancient languages. I know what they will find. I mean, I absolutely know they will find evidence that supports our theories. But if, you know, it's going to be tough to convince somebody of that, and experts in Sumerian language just aren't growing on trees. Let's put it that way. So, it's you know, it's a long road, but we're committed to the task. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, absolutely. It's I grew up, you know, I often compare myself to Sherlock Holmes on the hunt. You know, you're just totally depressed. If you remember your Sherlock Holmes, you're totally depressed if you're not doing research. You know, but once there's a crime to be solved or a mystery to be solved, boy, it's invigorating, and you just can't wait to hit the pavement. And you know, it's nice if you have a Watson or two that you can bring along to help you out.